guys, Chris from C10CJ. Figure I'd give you a quick short update or video on what I do for all these electrical checks. And I will tell you, I got a nice day today. I'm off on holiday, but man, is the weather not so great. It is snowing outside. It's a layer of ice because it rained before that, and it's a whopping 24 degrees outside. So I have gone ahead and I got the heater on in the shop here, pumping out some heat. Now that is a kerosene heater, so you don't want to run that if you're planning to paint, obviously the fire, but just because that thing's pumping out oils into the air, so even if I shut it off, you don't want to paint in air that's been heated by a kerosene heater. So with that, let's get to it. Let me show you what I'm about to do. Alright, so let me give you guys a little bit of overview on what I do for testing the electrical system before I go ahead and just hook this thing wide open to the battery. Since we're dealing with some very large cables, it'll suck some current in a hurry if you've got things hooked up wrong. So I've got the battery feeds right here, and then what I do is I will hook this one up to the battery, but then on the positive side I just put this, I have a set of test leads that I've made that allow me to adapt over to whatever. So I've got like a 3/8 inch ring on there, and I just feed that back through a simple switch and then through a very small fuse. This guy is like I think I've got a 10 amp in there right now. I'll use as small as a 3 amp, but I'm going to be turning on some lights like the headlights, so I need a little bit more current than 3 amp. But this is so that if you do run into a problem that you haven't anticipated, the fuse is going to pop and it's going to disconnect power for you before you start a fire or burn something up, so it gives you a chance to try and troubleshoot it. The very first test that I actually do is I meter between positive and negative to make sure that there's nothing going on there. Now, I'll give you a hint. You do need to have your alternator disconnected, otherwise the field windings will screw you up and make you think you have a short between these two. So disconnect your alternator before you do any metering tests on your circuitry. So, and then next thing I do is I just do generalized bonding checks. So instead of just doing continuity, I turn the ohm meter down to where it's 1 ohm per division. And so I'll meter between the ground post here, where I've got it on the cylinder head, to make sure that the cylinder head's got good connectivity. Actually, what I do is I meter up here on one of these valve cover bolts. The injectors are on the intake, so I'll meter to the intake manifold to make sure that these guys have good electrical grounds. And then I'll meter, I've got a big giant ground cable down in there, if you can see it. This guy, this is going to the chassis, right? So then what I do is I pick a random point on the chassis to meter, and I actually don't have any grounding straps on the cab just yet, but I metered from here to here, and I got really good bonding. So basically 0 ohms, which is really good. You really want less than 8 ohms resistance between all your grounding aspects. The other check I did was from cylinder head over to the maybe hard to see in here, to the distribution block for the grounds inside the power distribution module, to make sure that that's good. I meter between the two distribution blocks to make sure there's nothing there, and so forth. So just generalized checking. I'll just show you, yep, I do have the alternator disconnected sitting up there, so make sure that, otherwise you will drive yourself bonkers trying to chase down a short that's sitting right there. Alright, getting to the back of the truck, I do meter from the fuel tank to the chassis. That sole purpose is for this guy, the fuel sending unit, because fuel sending unit won't work if it doesn't have a ground, because all this thing is an ohm meter. So nothing fancy, but if it doesn't have any connectivity, then it can't measure ohms and it can't tell you how full your tank is. The fuel pump's got its own ground, but actually in reality I'm just going to tie that back to someplace here on the chassis. That's one thing I have yet to do, but that's easy. I just sand some powder coat off and drive a screw in there. That's pretty much it. I mean, in the back end it's just lights and the fuel tank, so there's not much there. I do got to get into the interior and do quite a bit of checks in here. I've got everything disconnected, so All the main connectors are unplugged, so even the ECU is unplugged. And of course the instrument cluster is sitting right there, so I can get back behind there. So it's basically just a series of going through and making sure that you don't have power where you shouldn't and you do have power where you should, just by doing some continuity checks. And then yeah, I'll put the battery in there and I will inject some power and go from there. And then you just keep checking everything out until you build up confidence that you've got good wiring, good circuitry. And then when you feel comfortable, you then put that thing straight up to the battery and see if she'll roll over. So, all right guys, with that, let's get back to it.